Hi guys, in this video I will share with you my opinion on browsers while also explaining a lot of technology surrounding them while doing so. I'm not gonna clickbait you guys, here is the list of browsers if you don't want to watch the whole video. However, I recommend doing so since the reason why browsers rank this way might be unknown. Before we begin, there are some things we need to clear up. Browsers are not as simple as you might think. They are complex programs that interpret many internet protocols in order to establish connection with the servers and use languages such as CSS, JavaScript and HTML to turn binary code into an interface that we humans can interact with. These topics are very complex and beyond the scope of this video. Instead, this video will serve as a guide for you to find a browser that meets your particular needs and give you knowledge to pick future browsers. Contrary to what you might have heard from those Firefox guys, there is not such thing as a universally best browser, but there are some browsers that you should definitely avoid. Okay, so now we have to talk about what makes a good browser good to begin with. And I'm gonna start with a bit of a red pill here and say that the speed of the browser and its RAM usage are not as important as people believe. A lot of people have a misconception that browser speed being, let's say, 10% faster means that the browser is able to download something 10% faster, which is false. Or let's say you are using a slow browser and watching a YouTube video, but the video is occasionally stopping in order to load. You might think that switching to a faster browser would fix that, but no. That is not what browser being fast means. When browser is called fast, that just means that it is able to execute JavaScript and CSS more efficiently. While there are certain outliers and maybe some statistical anomalies, very rarely will you find a speed difference between browsers to be higher than 10%. And just to give practical example, even in those more extreme scenarios, difference between a slow and a fast browser just means that if it takes a fast browser 1 second to load something, it will take 1.1 seconds for a slow browser. And again, this is a more extreme scenario. In real world, difference is usually smaller. You will only be able to feel the difference in the speed if you are using a very shitty PC and trying to do something demanding on a browser, such as using an online video editing software or playing games on the browser. Otherwise, speed is irrelevant. And as for the RAM usage of browsers, we have to discuss what makes one browser use more RAM than the other. So, RAM contains data that is used by software in that very instant. And if one browser uses more memory for the same task, it means that it is usually doing more things on that tab, such as having more features, tracking software, or more demanding GUI, or anything else that could take more space on the memory. So why would I say that this is not important either? Well, simply because browsers that do take up more RAM are usually the browsers that you shouldn't be using in the first place. Browsers that are good will use the similar amount of RAM because they are just keeping necessary resources for the tabs you have opened, while bad ones will use more RAM because they have things such as trackers and bloated features. Speaking of bloated features, we will come to the first browser that should never be used, which is Opera GX. This is a browser for which I can say that nearly everything is bad and should never be used. The only somewhat good thing about Opera GX is its interface, which is a subjective thing, but it comes with a huge downside, taking an enormous amount of RAM due to its very flashy interface and extremely redundant features. While making this video, I got into a debate with my friend about how Opera GX is a horrible browser and how, aside from many other bad things that Opera GX does, it takes huge amount of RAM, possibly the highest of any popular browser, to which he responded with,
Actually, you can just limit the amount of RAM Opera GX uses.
Which is in my opinion like saying,
Monster Hunter Wilds is not unoptimized, you just have to set graphic settings to very low, disable anti-aliasing, turn on the upscaler, and you might get 60 FPS, trust me bro.
While I see some benefits of their RAM limit features, it is far from a permanent solution for their insane RAM problem. What that feature actually does is it makes Opera GX try to stay within a boundary that is set by doing multiple things like placing some tabs into hibernation, but that makes you load them again. In case all of the tabs are active, it might just not let you open new tabs, it might use swap memory instead of RAM, but that will make it run slower, and again, this isn't a hard cap, this is a soft cap, so it won't necessarily stay within a boundary. I get that this whole browser's gimmick is having features that other browsers don't have, but it feels like some boss in their company overhired people when this browser was being made, and once they finished making it, he didn't want to fire access people and decided to make them add every possible feature, such as adding keyboard sounds, so when you type something browser makes some noise, and I believe Opera GX is the only browser that does that. It also has an overly complicated custom background, while in some browsers you can just simply upload any image and use it as a background. In Opera GX you have to go through several confusing bloated features. Additionally, they have a special store for their browser themes, which is hidden behind multiple clicks and unusual features. They also have many features that are the definition of redundancy, like having a screenshot feature in a browser when you can just shift Windows S if you're using Windows operating system. It has news article that is mainly centered around games and anime and other similar stuff, but again, who opens a browser just to see that stuff? There are hundreds of websites that are gonna do it better. Probably the most damning thing this browser does is allowing Chinese government to access all of your data. Apart from allowing Chinese government access to all of your data, it also has Google as a default search engine. Now, browser and search engine are different things, and the reason for Google being the main search engine here is Google paying billions of dollars to many browsers in order to have Google as the default engine. And remember, Google is not a tech company, it is an ad company, and using Google search engine is the best way to get all of your data stolen, so you should switch to a different one as soon as you download a browser that has it as a default. In many other browsers, switching to a different search engine is simple, but in Opera GX that option is hidden behind so many sub-menus that I had to use ChatGPT just to navigate to it. And after setting every option I could find to maximize privacy, I still had mediocre results on coveryourtracks.org, which is a website that shows you how private your browser is. So in summary, this browser has an atrocious RAM usage, extremely redundant features, horrible privacy. I can go on and on about why you should not use Opera GX, but I don't want to dedicate too much time to this browser, and there are already plenty of videos. The only reason I spent so much time talking about this browser is because I was explaining technologies behind browsers in general. Anyways, moving on to the most popular browser, Google Chrome. As of the writing of this video, this is by far the most popular browser, which is very surprising considering that it is widely known as a browser that steals the most amount of your data. As previously said, Google is not a tech company, but an ad company, so everything in Google is designed around stealing your data. After testing the browser on coveryourtracks.com, I got what I believe to be the worst rating possible. The reason why Google is the fastest is not because Google has much better technology and best developers, although good developers play a part, but because Google maintains Chromium, which is a free and open source web browser project that is based for a vast majority of browsers, and since Google maintains it, they implement changes that benefit their browser the most. Another large reason for Google Chrome's success is the positive feedback loop that exists in its sphere, where developers make extensions tailored to work best on Google Chrome, since the most people use Google Chrome, which makes more users switch to Google Chrome, since it has the best extensions, solidifying Google Chrome as the most popular browser. So, to recap, Google Chrome is the fastest browser that has best extension compatibility at the cost of being definitely the biggest spyware. Should you use it? Well, unless your setup is very bad, the additional speed is gonna be redundant. And I don't find the extension compatibility to be too bad on other browsers, so I don't find the upsides to be worth the whole stealing all of your data downside. So no, don't use Google Chrome since there are better alternatives. Another popular, relatively popular browser is Microsoft Edge. Compared to its predecessor, Internet Explorer, Microsoft Edge is actually used for something more than just downloading other browsers. sometimes. To make a long story short, Microsoft Edge is kind of like a toned down Google Chrome. It works a bit slower than Chrome, it has a bit worse compatibility with extensions than Chrome, and it steals a bit less data than Chrome. Without changing settings, I got the same privacy results on coveryourtracks.com as Google Chrome. There is no reason to use this browser as your daily, however it might just be me, but most of the time Bing search engine, which is the default on Microsoft Edge, has provided me with better search results than Brave search. That goes to say that you don't really have to use only one browser, but can instead use many different browsers for different tasks. And Microsoft Edge is not just a browser that I use to install other browsers, but also to find image assets for my videos. Now, let's talk about Mozilla Firefox. And I know that this browser has some hardcore fanboys. Something that I would consider good, or at the very least unique, is the fact that this browser is de facto the only browser that is not based on Chromium. Of course, Safari uses WebKit, which is not Chromium based, but that is on iOS, and if you look at any other non-Chromium based browsers that work on Linux or Windows, you will either see forks of Firefox like LibreWolf or some obscure and unknown ones like Conqueror. In modern times, Mozilla Firefox is getting progressively worse because there is a feedback loop of there not being enough developers making extensions for Mozilla, which causes less people to use it, which causes less people to develop for it, and so on and so forth. But another thing is that Mozilla is slowly going from having a reputation similar to Linux of being a wholesome chungus open source project or something like that, into slowly being seen more as a Google 2.0. In the beginning, Google was seen as not your average company, having their motto be "Don't be evil," and then they changed that into "Do the right thing." And then they got rid of that entirely, and if you are familiar with Google's business practices, you will know that they don't really follow the "Don't be evil" motto anymore. And similar progression is happening with Mozilla Firefox, where they went from being developers wanting to make a world a better place or something like that, to being more and more profit driven. And in relatively recent times they changed their user agreement, which is that thing that you don't read when you install a program, to include them being able to use your browsing data and stop you from using their browser however they want. So, would I recommend using this browser? Well, it's certainly better than Google Chrome, but I would not recommend it since there are better alternatives. Don't get me wrong, I think that maintaining an engine that is not Chromium is important. Brave is Chromium based, so it can use nearly anything the Google Chrome can use compared to Firefox that can only use extensions made for it. Without changing settings, Firefox has worse privacy rating than Brave.
Oh, but Chuddy, what if you harden your Firefox?
You will have to go through so much trouble to get safety already provided by Brave browser, and a much bigger issue is, do you really think that a normie will go through all that trouble?
Actually, you just have to find the GitHub page containing a .js file, which has good privacy-oriented preferences, which you can clone into your repository on your machine and then apply it. It's just simple, bro.
Oh yeah, and if you go too hard with privacy settings, you will break many websites. And remember, those are the websites that you already have a higher likelihood of not working since they are made for Chromium and not Gecko, the Mozilla engine. But seriously, these people heavily overestimate the aptitude of the average person on a computer. I had my colleagues that have over 7 years in education in the field of computer ask me so many extremely dumb questions that I can't imagine how many mistakes does an average person make with computers. People don't want to watch a 20-minute video tutorials filled with technical terms on how to make their browser private. They want something that is already private and easy to use and easy to understand, or at least very close to it. That way of thinking is also the reason why my video tutorials are always nearly just download what Mr. Guy with a Slavic accent tells you to download and paste it into your game folder. And again, it has to be that way, because even at this level of simplicity, Many people still do not understand. But a bigger question we need to ask is, why does Firefox, that brands itself as a privacy-oriented browser, require you to spend 20 minutes at least hardening the browser in order to gain privacy? At this point, it really seems like they made it intentionally this difficult to make this browser private. So, if you really want to use Gecko engine, you will either have to do some hardening on Firefox, or even better use LibreWolf, which is a fork of Firefox that was made with privacy and security pre-configured, so I would recommend it over Firefox due to its simplicity. As for the Brave browser, I believe that as of the writing of this video, Brave is currently the best one you can use as an everyday browser. First off, let's list the downsides. As with the vast majority of browsers, Brave was also paid by Google to use Google search as a default search engine, but you can easily switch it back to Brave search. Since Brave is privacy focused, you might find some issues while adding some extensions, and in my personal experience that rarely happens, but you might have to fiddle with it in that case. But the biggest thing that is off-putting to new users is the crypto that Brave browser is shilling, but you can just ignore it. And what about the good sides of this browser? It does not have many features, meaning that it doesn't use that much RAM. Speed is not that relevant as previously said, but this browser is rather fast, and most importantly, this browser has an enormous amount of privacy that is super easy to achieve. You just switch from Google to Brave search and boom, in less than 20 seconds you have gained a level of privacy that is so high that coveryourtracks.org places Brave browser results to look nearly the same as the Tor browser. I need to emphasize that no, Brave is not more private than Tor browser. Tor is a different type of beast that uses many complicated technologies that deserve a video of their own, but these technologies in turn make it way too slow to be used as a daily browser for something like YouTube and similar stuff. But the fact that coveryourtracks.org even considers Brave to be comparable to Tor is nuts. What makes Brave the best browser is you getting enormous amount of privacy and ad blocker out of the box with no spending 20 minutes of hardening or any other difficult technical labor. It's easy to understand and do, making it perfect for all people, especially normies. Also, don't tell YouTube I told you this, but if you use Brave on your smartphone, you can remove ads and play music while your phone is turned off, which are most important features of YouTube Premium for free. Another good browser is Mullvad browser, since it is already made by a rather trusted corporation whose claim to fame is security and privacy with their Mullvad VPN. This browser, much like Brave, is very easy to use and you don't even have to change in settings which search engine you will use, since you have it below the search bar, so you won't use Google by accident. This browser has many privacy modes, named Standard, Safer and Safest. On Standard mode it has decent privacy according to coveryourtracks.org, and on the safest it is comparable to Tor, which is crazy, although again Tor is more private yata yata. But talking of Tor, Mullvad browser was made in collaboration with the Tor browser team, and the whole idea behind this browser is to be a Tor browser that is used with a VPN instead of a Tor network, and of course as a daily browser and instead of a specialist browser like Tor. So, if you are already using Mullvad VPN, using their browser is a good idea, since you're already placing trust in that company. On a similar note, I think that using Safari on iOS machines is acceptable since it is made by it and therefore the fastest, and since iOS is not open source, you're already placing a lot of trust in that company. However, I would still recommend something like a Brave as a better choice. I want to talk about one more promising browser that is called Vivaldi. What makes this browser special is its customization capability, and I got a decent privacy rating with very small amount of changing settings. And with the amount of settings you can change, you can probably get this browser to be even more private. I personally don't think I would care enough to spend that much time customizing a browser, but as far as I can see, this is just a better version of Opera GX, because it does everything Opera GX does, but better, meaning taking less RAM, being highly customizable, and stealing less of your data, among other things. It's just that this browser is not marketed strictly towards gamers. So, as for conclusion, which browser do I use? And the answer is, I use Brave as a daily browser for night 98% of things I do, if not even more. I also use Microsoft Edge for finding assets, since I like Bing search results better than Brave search results. And yes, I know I can switch between search engines, but this just takes less time. I also use Tor browser, but since it's too slow and redundantly safe to be a daily driver, I use it for things such as asking ChatGPT how to dissolve a body of a 75 kg chicken in acid, which common household chemicals should I not mix, and similar. I want to emphasize again, in case it wasn't clear enough in this video, that the most important thing a browser has is its privacy and security, closely followed by its ease of use. Browser speed is irrelevant unless you are running it on a super bad PC or a smart fridge or another object that should not be able to connect to the internet in the first place. And high RAM usage of a browser is an indication that that browser is either spying on you or has too many redundant features. In either case, that browser is a goyslop. Before any Redditor calls me a retard for saying that Brave or any other browser I called good is placed where it is. And yes, I checked even Reddit and saw that they came to a conclusion that Brave is a browser for crypto bros and whatnot, and others will be angry that I did not talk about their favorite browser that has 200 active users. But here we have to understand that about 97, 95 something like that % of the world is using browsers that are mega spyware. And browsers like Brave would not be able to do as much harm as Google does even if it wanted to. We can't make an average person use CubeOS or TailsOS with Tor browser for the best OPSEC. But we can give them a browser that sucks less. Thank you for watching, hope you found this video useful, and see you next time.